Hello and welcome to the second part of my animatic tutorial. I'm May and we'll just talk about the compositing step. In the previous video we already went over the thumbnailing, sketching, using tools to help you with the overall process, and then also doing line art and how you generally set up an animation in Krita. If you're interested in that and haven't seen it yet, you can definitely check that out, but this video will focus on the video editing aspect of it. Let's get started. I'll do this in After Effects, which I've been using for 2 years now, which is why I know a few tools that make compositing easier definitely. I'll also go over these tools and what I generally keep in mind while compositing and editing now. In general, you should ask yourself the questions: do you want a mostly static animatic with few movements, no movement, and only use compositing to adjust timing? Or do you want a lot of fast movement and go crazy with some effects? This all, of course, depends heavily on the audio you use for your animatic or on the story and the mood you want your animatic to have. I also like to edit videos in general, which is why I used some pan and zoom transitions you would find in many edits or music videos, but not as much in TV shows and so on, in the animatic example I'm showing here. But now let's move into After Effects and go over some tips I have for compositing. You could probably translate most of these tips into other softwares like Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve and so on as well. Okay, here we are in After Effects, and don't worry about these fields, this is just plugins I installed which help me with editing. This is the initial setup for the animatic I'm showing in here. For now, let's start really simple. If you want to create a new composition, you can click here, and here you can adjust the resolution and also the frame rate and so on, and the duration. Let's say we want this to be just the other way around. We want it to have the standard 16:9 aspect ratio, and then you have this empty composition is what it's called. You can also rename this if you want to. Now let's go over the tips I have. At first you will want to import your clips, and for example, let's say I want to import this image sequence. With image sequences in After Effects it's pretty easy. You can just put it in here and it will automatically see this as an image sequence. Now let's say you want to have a nice colored background. What you can do is just add a solid layer and change its color. Yeah, let's put it at this color. Now you have a background layer for the whole setup of your scene. If you have your images as separate files, just image files, it's very useful to make use of folders. You can create folders. If you just go to a new folder, I like to separate the background and the characters into different folders. And what I also did with the naming of the layers, I have a lot of layers, is that I did something like A and B to make sure that I know, okay, these layers all belong together. Then if you just want to cut some clips, let's say I'm gonna import 1 and let's say 10, yeah. You have your music, you can also import music in here, just put it in there at first and then you have it down here, and then you can adjust the length of your clips by holding and dragging. If you press Ctrl, Shift and D, you can cut it like this. Just copy paste is the regular shortcut, and with Ctrl C and Ctrl V. In general, there are some keyboard shortcuts which can make your life easier, but mostly just a Ctrl Shift D for cutting. And then also if you, for example, do this and hold Shift, it will automatically snap to, for example, the playhead here or the next layer, which can make everything easier. If you import many layers, let's say I import all of these, and you want them to appear directly afterwards, after each other, you can go here and go to sequence layers, and this will automatically put them apart, which is also very useful. By pressing Shift, you select multiple layers and can cut all of them simultaneously and so on. That's it for how you can adjust the length of your clips. And then to have your whole scene more manageable to read, let's say you have this background layer and these characters, you can make your character layer, for example, have this color, and then your background layer have this color, and proceed with this for the whole animatic just to have a better overview. You can see I did this in here. The background layers are in these colors and the character layers in the dark blue color. That's how I went with the coloring for the animatic, and it's very useful to color code your layers if you have many of them. Then to have a better overview, what you can do is you can right click on here, say select label group. Now every layer with this color will be selected, and then if you press this icon, it will activate the shy layer option. If you press here, then all of the layers that have this click on will disappear, and you have an overview over all the other layers. Like this, you can easily, let's say we only want to view the bright purple ones, and now it will only show them and some of these as well, which are just null layers, which I'll go over now. With null layers and parenting, it's very easy to do some more complex movement. How null layers work in After Effects is you can parent, in general, you can parent layers to one another. For example, here I parented this layer to this layer, and what happens when you do that, I'm just gonna show you in here. This is how you parent the layers. You just drag this to another layer, and now if I press P for the position component, there are many shortcuts for After Effects, but yeah, this is just to bring up the position property. And here, if you drag, you can move the layer, and as you see, this layer automatically follows this. If a layer is parented to another layer, it will automatically follow the movement this other layer has. Now if I would press P here and move this, it will move on its own. If the parent is moved, then the child is moved as well. With the null objects, you can create a new null object, and what this is that it's simply an empty object, and what you can do is, let's select both these layers and parent them to the null object, and like this you can easily move multiple layers the same way. And this can make your whole editing process easier if you have multiple layers you want to move. And also just making use of parenting is also very helpful when you have, for example, an arm of a character on a separate layer. Here you can see that the arm moves down on its own. This is how these layers are set up. Here we have the right layer and here we have the left layer. And what's also a tip I have for you is to make use of masking. This is just one image, but if I press M, this will bring up the mask properties, and I could now, let's say I don't have an effect on this mask. Now you can see it's the whole image, but here you can change the mask mode, and like this you can separate your layers into multiple. And this is a separate image, the hand, and it's parented to the body here. And this way, this has some movement. Say for the position, for example, it has this movement, and this arm will automatically have this movement as well. But to make this arm rotate and move in this way, what I did is animated the rotation. Here, if you press R, you can bring up the rotation. And I also changed the anchor point, which you can do by picking this or just pressing Y, and then you can move a layer's anchor point. This is this little icon here. And for example, if you do an arm rotation, it makes sense to have this at the joint of the arm, and with this image, it's, if I just bring up the position, you can see that the arm ends here. So this is where I placed the rotation point. But yeah, that's how you can go about animating some parts of a body. Now let's move on to how you can create depth with backgrounds. And for this, let's use this example here. I have multiple layers for my backgrounds, and you can see that the ones in the front move the fastest and the ones in the back the slowest, which is also what happens in real life. You can create a sense of depth this way by simply having the layers move differently. If I bring up the scale property by pressing S, you can see that this has a scale animation, then this will also have a scale animation, and this as well. And these are 3 different layers. This is like the front, and this is the middle part, and this is the back part. And these other ones are parented, as you can see. And they also have some masks on them. Yeah, it's lots of editing you can do if you want to. This is how you can create a sense of depth, which is called a parallax effect. It's just that the elements closest to camera move the fastest. In general, while animating, I like to make use of the anticipation and follow-through principle, which you can see here. Anticipation means that if you have a movement, for example, I have this slide to the left of the front layers and to the right of the back layers. At first, the front layers go to the right and then they go to the left, and the other way around for the back layers. And here you can also see that I have a little follow through. Maybe here's a better example. After the slide animation, this slides to the right and then it kind of overshoots, it's what it's called, and then goes back to its default position. Here's the default position. This is how the overshoot is, and originally it comes from the left, it goes to the right, and then it goes a little back to the left. In general, it's just very nice to, if you want to have a smooth movement, have some anticipation and follow through. In general, this doesn't just apply to video editing, it also applies to if you're animating your characters in a way. And now lastly, I'll just mention this little plugin here, which is called Ease Copy for After Effects. It was very, very useful in here, since you can, with the keyframes, if you have some keyframes and you can adjust the timing using the graph editor here. You can find some tutorials on that if you're more interested in learning that, but you can easily select some keyframes, then press copy and paste the ease on some other keyframes. Like for example here, it's probably what I did here. You can select these and then paste the ease, and this will automatically make your layers move in the same speed, which is very nice if you want to create smooth movement. Lastly, I'll just make you aware of the effects here. There are lots of effects in After Effects, but some of the ones I like to use for changing up colors is the tritone effect, which you can use to adjust the highlights, shadows, and midtones. You can also use brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and so on, which is just general color correction, but there are lots of other effects as well, which you could also look into if you want to use a lot of compositing in your editing. But that's it for the compositing tips I have, and with that the animatic tutorial videos come to an end, and we went over the steps of thumbnailing, sketching, using tools to help you, then also doing line art or finishing your sketches, exporting, and finally compositing. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, and you can also write down what kind of animatics you would like to see more of or would like to make yourself in the future. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great day. Goodbye.